In this episode of Ask a Griffin, we cover the 4 keys to the right price. Now, point number 1 is having to deal with the emotion of pricing a property, especially when it's your home. Really, you get out of control and you begin to make what is a financial process emotional, and that's dangerous. So I think the first key point is just to simply recognize the fact that the right price matters. And the reason for that is that you can't just go out there and make up a price. Hey, just go get me an offer. Well, wouldn't that be convenient for all of us realtors if we could do that for a property owner? But that's just not the way that it works. So number 1 point here is just to take a breath and understand that this is a financial instrument. I know it's your home. I understand that. Or it's an emotional property sale, whatever it may be. The price really does matter, because what we're trying to avoid is down the line where you say, well, I'm just not going to give it away, and then there's all this resistance to find the right price point for any property, anytime, and any type of marketplace. The second point here is, well, how do you do that? How do you get into the nitty-gritty of finding that right price if it does matter? See, because the first objection that you hear from property sellers is, well, look, my house is better than that one, or it's different than this one. And that's true. Now, if you were living in a community where it was A model and they had A model, even in those cases where the product is what I would call homogenized or a lot alike, like a commodity, it would be a little bit more easy to make that comparison, because then we're really just saying, okay, where is it locationally in the development? But what about those cases where it really is quite different from one area to the next? Now, I live in New England, so our marketplace is Cape Cod and Boston, Massachusetts. Those places really can have this variety, but you can, and I will repeat, you can compare apples, let's get that out of there, come on, get it out of there, apples to oranges in our business. So what that means, simply put, is that one house, we understand, is not like the next. I mean, we're not selling coffee beans. A coffee bean is a coffee bean is a coffee bean. Same with a barrel of oil. So when you're comparing commodities or trading commodities and making a market for those, for example, it's relatively easy to see where that price belongs. But if I have one house versus the next, it looks like an apple to an orange. So how do you compare them? Well, if you go online today, you're going to find not only some of the major companies that have an online evaluation tool, but there's many others that are starting to get into that game. Well, how do they do that? Is it magic? Well, of course not. What they're doing is they are taking available financial information, also known as the assessed values, and other public information that is now shared through MLS. They're throwing it into what's called an algorithm, some sort of a mathematical formula that is spitting out a guesstimate of value. Now, that's a decent start. However, it is not good enough. And all of those companies will actually reveal to you that their variance could be up to 20%. 20%? Well, that's just not even remotely good enough if you're going to take a serious consideration of current market value. So what you have to understand, there are further methodologies that real estate agents take to consider factors that can't be gleaned offline. Your current condition, what the property looks like on the exterior, what it looks like on the interior, and the current market trend. Right in the immediate area, what is happening right there and then has to be factored in. Is it trending upwards or downwards? Math can't really see that. And by the way, on assessed values, we're not saying that those are current market value, but really, it's not something you just throw away. It's another way to value something. It's actually what's called a lagging indicator. An assessed value typically falls behind where the market value is. So they're low when you're going up, and they're high when it's going down. So what do you use a lagging indicator for? Well, you can measure against it. And that's one of the ways we've discovered we can put math in this game. And that leads us to point number 3, where simple math does indeed reveal something that's similar to the stock market, and this might sound a little strange here, but your trading range, okay? What does that mean? It sounds all foreign in real estate, but it's actually language that I saw regularly way back when I was in the investment banking business and we looked at the stock market on a regular basis. Is that all of that math that we talked about while comparing those apples to oranges, if you analyze that, and I'm not talking about rocket science math, simple equations like sold price to final, or sold price to final asking price, that ratio alone can reveal an enormous amount of those apples and oranges and how they were comparing. What happened? Was one of them in really good condition and sold, for example, 125% of its last assessed value, and the other one that I'm comparing to is 95% because it's a distress sale? Not to lose you in that mathematical discussion, but there is simple math, fractions, ratios that you probably learned way back when that can reveal exactly where you'll trade in the range. There is math that reveals that. Now, the fourth key to this is that in spite of all of this analysis that can and should be happening at that early discussion on price. I mean, look at folks, we're not trying to play pricing it right bingo. You don't line up a bunch of real estate agents and the one that guesses the price that you want wins the listing. That's dangerous. It's a waste of time for you, and it discombobulates the marketplace. So what we want to understand ultimately is that key point number 4 is that an asking price that is out of your trading range or your potential trading range actually is going to prevent you from getting offers. So let's just take a pause there for a second and say, well, how can that be? Because if you look at the math after sales take place in any marketplace, you'll see the final sold price and the final asking price vary by only a few percentage points in most places. So for example, in the Back Bay of Boston, it's only really 1% on average that's given up plus or minus. If you looked at Cape Cod, there's a bigger variance because it's not as steady of a market, but that can only be about 3 or 4%. So if you were to cheat too far out of that trading range, well, no wonder why your real estate agent can't bring you an offer. You just can't put a buyer in a headlock and make them write an offer. And furthermore, here's the problem with that. For you as a property seller, if you ask somebody to go out there and represent your best interest and just get you an offer, now their language and their approach has to change. Rather than making a market for your property properly by bringing in activity because you started at the right asking price, they now have to go out and hard sell an offer. Now you're going to get upset because typically that offer will come in what you perceive to be a lowball, but you set yourself up for that moment. Why? Because the wrong asking price took you out of the trading range where there would be natural activity. And one of the points I want to make here is that the majority of properties are sold once they're priced correctly by one brokerage to the next, one agent and another. That's the way it works. Very similar to the stock market. So understand, let's hit these key points again here. The 4 keys to getting your property priced right for any current market, anytime, anywhere, is to just walk through these steps and understand, take a beat emotionally. The right price matters. Say that to yourself, so that will open you up to be really receptive of the proper information to understand that even though I love my home and I'm going to sell myself on how great it is versus the neighbors, I still have to consider an apples to oranges comparison. Even though it's not obvious how they relate, they do, and you must consider them. Number 3 is that the way that you make sense of an apples to orange comparison is through simple math that should be considered. You want to get with a real estate agent professional who knows that math and can dig in there with you and find really what is the right trading range, where possibly would your property sell in that current marketplace? And not cheating way outside of that, because by the time you finally get to setting the right asking price, nobody's saying that you can't go a little bit to the outside edge of the range. You could do that for 2 or 3 weeks depending on how good the market is. But look, folks, if nobody shows up to show the property, and that means, as I've said, other agencies. That's the majority of the way property is sold. One agency to the next, one agent to the next. If they're not showing up with their buyers to see your property, there's a very high probability that your asking price has gone outside of the range and needs adjustment. It's not as if somebody's going to come along and overpay for your property. People know where the market is generally. So be inside that range, okay? So get out there and remember the 4 keys to the right price. Thanks for being here. If you like this episode, do us a favor, share it along to somebody who needs this kind of help. Thanks.